Sounds like Europe. Cross-border podcasting.
Hello and welcome to Sounds Like Europe, Cross-Border Podcasting, a project brought to you by WePod. I'm your host, Javi Caminero. I believe that the things I'm enjoying the most of Sounds Like Europe are talking to podcasters from different parts of Europe and discovering many interesting projects and ways of understanding the podcasting industry. For me, this podcast is a great opportunity to get to know how we want to witness the evolution and growth of the projects we work on and the projects we love listening to. Apart from that, podcasts can be very useful when it comes to analyzing a society. That's why I would like to dedicate some episodes of Sounds Like Europe to dive into the insights of podcasting in different countries of Europe. Today, I'm joined by Márton Bede, a Hungarian journalist and podcaster from S1EP9, our Hungarian partner in the WePod project. Hi Márton, how are you?
Hey, hi Javi, I'm doing fine.
First of all, tell me Márton, what's your story? What's your relationship with podcasting?
Well, I've been a journalist for exactly 25 years now. It's the only job I've ever done, I think. And I've always worked at online news websites. I started working at one, and I have never worked in print, nothing else. And we started the website S1EP9 in 2013. I was one of the founding team. And we start for a long time. We didn't do podcasts. First, we had text, written articles. Then we had a very good video section, so films, a lot of short films. And then a couple of years ago, we started podcasting. The podcast I'm involved in, Hung. Don't worry if you cannot pronounce it correctly in Hungarian, because Hungarian is quite difficult for foreigners. So we started this during COVID, actually, a bit more than 3 years ago in early 2021. It was one of the first podcasts we had, and we've been doing it for 3 years. We do it every week, and it's become quite successful in these 3 years.
Yeah, you're the host of. I was going to talk to you about that. You're the host of this podcast. I'm going to try Hung. Was that
well done?
Okay. And you're the host. Well, one of the hosts of this podcast. Tell me, and how do you do this podcast? What is it about? Who are your colleagues?
All right, so it's the three of us, three guys. Our editor-in-chief, Peter Uy, another colleague, Robert Winkler, and myself. Every week we publish around 60-minute podcasts where we discuss the events of the week. And it's a very, very broad range of issues, everything from politics to music to gastronomy. Whatever comes up. It is important to mention that S1EP9 has a quite successful subscription system. We have 25,000 subscribers right now, paid subscribers, which is quite a lot for Hungary. People who actually pay for S1EP9, they get a longer version of our podcast, and they get it early, a couple of days earlier. Than they get like the 60-minute version, I think, now on the Saturday, and people who don't pay for S1EP9, they get like a 50-minute version, and they only get it on Tuesday.
25,000 paid subscribers is a lot for Hungary, and I believe for podcasting as a whole. It's a very impressive number.
No, the 25. No, maybe I didn't say the 25,000 subscribers are for S1EP9, not for our podcast. So and they get access to various things, and one of them is an earlier and longer version of our podcast.
Not bad either. Eh? It's not bad. We cannot talk about Hungary, Márton, without mentioning its current political situation. You will know better than me and better than anyone listening, probably, that Viktor Orbán's government hasn't been very respectful with this independent journalism. So How do you cope up with the lack of press freedom, both in your podcast and in Nake as a company?
I think not respectful is quite an understatement. For the past 14 years, when Orban came to power for the second time, actually, because he was prime minister a couple of years earlier as well. So for the past 14 years, we've had the same prime minister and the same system, which is in a continuous destruction of democracy, and one of the aspects of this destruction is the constant war against free media. It is becoming more and more difficult to be a journalist in Hungary. It is more and more difficult to have a media company that turns the profits. Maybe basically, government politicians do not talk to independent media. We don't get an answer ever from a politician of the government. You cannot get an interview. You will even information that should be public is not made public. So it is quite difficult, and it is getting worse. I mean, it's a slow process to destroy a democracy. Well, it can be done faster, obviously, but in Hungary it is quite slow. But year by year, it gets worse. So now it's quite a lot worse than maybe 8 years ago. Although I have to mention that maybe in the past, so the last time we had elections was in 2022, when they won again a 2/3 majority, because they always win a 2/3 majority. And in these past 2 years, it has not gotten significantly worse. It has not gotten any better either. But I mean, we still exist, and we'll see what the future brings.
So
I am not very hopeful.
this lack of hope I'm sensing when listening to you. Do you believe right now that the simple fact of still existing is enough? Do you believe that in a few years' time, if they keep destroying democracy, as you well said, at this pace, a company like Nake could be gone?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see how this system works. We know the international examples from Turkey to Russia to Venezuela, and this is the destruction of democracy is a continuous downhill slope. So, and in these past 14 years, there have been media businesses that went out of business because they were forced to go out of business. There were newspapers that were closed down, basically in tricky ways, but obviously by the government. And we are going downhill. So, as we go further downhill, more bad things will happen for sure. Maybe not to neg in the next couple of years, but until this government is in power, things will not get better for media, because in an autocracy, that's just impossible.
And
what happens? Autocracies don't get better, don't get freer.
No,
they finish one day, but they never get freer.
And how does this going downhill you talk about? How does this affect the evolution of such a young media as podcasting?
I think the major effect. I was thinking about this question because you sent me earlier, and so I had time to think about this. And I think that the major effect that you see in podcasts is probably the same as you see in other parts of media, is that there is just little money. So, even if you have good ideas, as you very well know, some forms of journalism are cheaper to produce. Other forms of journalism are more expensive to produce. Hungary is already quite a small market. There are less than 10 million people who speak Hungarian. Obviously, not all 10 million are interested in the news. Even less are interested in what independent media has to offer. So I think the main effect is that you tend to choose the cheaper forms of journalism. And in podcasting, there are also forms that are cheaper, and there are also other forms that are more expensive. The cheapest form of podcasting is, I think, what our podcast does: 3 journalists sitting in a studio and talking, because it doesn't cost much. If the microphones are there and you bought the Adobe Audition software, that's it. Not many more costs involved. If you want to produce a documentary series that takes a long time to produce, maybe there's traveling involved, that is more expensive. And I think this is one of the reasons why these kind of podcasts, our podcast is also one of these, is the more successful type in Hungary. And also at Neg, even though we have other types of podcasts as well.
Yeah, tell me, what other podcasts do you have right now in your company? Where are you producing? What other podcasts are as successful or nearly as successful as yours? Tell me.
The reason why our particular podcast is the most popular is not necessarily because ours is the best, but because we were already 3 quite well-known journalists. And when we started this, so if you are well known, you already have an audience. They start to listen to it, and it gets popular. We also, so some of the other podcasts that Neg produces right now, we have an equivalent of this, but it's 3 women journalists talking also about events, maybe not the same events that we guys talk about, but it's a similar format. We also have a very successful podcast on books that every 2 weeks they produce a podcast on a literary subject or a particular book. Like, for example, right now they are doing a podcast on the new Gabriel Garcia Marquez book that is coming out posthumously, and it's a big event in Hungary as well. We also have a podcast called Newsroom, where one of our journalists talks to other journalists working here about a subject they covered, an article they wrote, going more in depth into that. And I think these are the regular ones. We've also had more of the documentary type of things, like many episodes on the same subject. We had a quite successful one on a famous crime in Hungary where a village butcher's wife disappeared, and nobody could really prove what happened, but everybody thought that something very bad happened. I mean, she was obviously killed, but what the butcher exactly did was a big news item in Hungary. There was a good podcast that we did on that, and I'm sure more things will.
Yeah,
eventually.
I was getting kind of surprised because I didn't hear anything related to true crime, and I was like, this must be the first company that is surviving without doing any true crime, because true crime right now is like
you cannot survive in a 21st century
without
true crime. But I mean, the thing is that Serial, the well-known American podcast, was such a big hit that everybody felt that this. We should try to do something similar, and what we did at Neg, I wasn't involved in it, but my colleagues who did it, I think that they did an excellent job. I loved listening to it.
Here in Spain, just to give you some context, podcasting started growing some years ago, mainly between 2016 and 2018, more or less. In Italy, it happened maybe at the same time or almost at the same time. And I think it's fair to say that nowadays here in Spain, podcasts are an established form of entertainment. Taking this into account and translating that into the situation in Hungary, in what stage would you say podcasting is right now in your country?
I think, as with many other trends, because this is a trend, a fashion in journalism, we are a bit behind Western Europe. So we started maybe a bit later. You said 16 to 18. I think in Hungary, like, podcasts started becoming big, even though there were some podcasts earlier on.
Yeah, of course.
Because there are always some pioneers, but I think more around 19, 20, 21, think I noticed around COVID that there were a lot of new Hungarian podcasts starting, and I think I think the market is saturated at this point, especially with people sitting in the studio and discussing the current events of the week format. But I think I don't know much about podcasting in Spain, but I also in the English language podcasts, there are also, I think, too many of guys sitting in the studio and discussing whatever happened.
Yeah, this is something that is worrying everyone in Hungary, in England, in Spain. Sure. There are maybe too many. And now it's harder than ever to be unique, and to feel like you are needed, and people want to listen to you and know to the rest of the podcasting industry, who is big and great almost.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree.
Before we end this episode, Márton, I would like to ask you 3 more questions. These are 3 questions I've been asking to everyone who comes here to talk to me in Sounds Like Europe. You are the first Hungarian, so I've been very, very open with this episode because I feel I'm learning a lot while talking to you. So let's keep with that, and let's keep continuing with this lesson about podcasting in Hungary. What's the most important podcast right now in your country? You have mentioned a lot of them. This you have been doing in S1EP9, your podcast, your colleagues' podcast. But tell me, if you had to choose one, being as objective as possible, which podcast is the most important one?
Important is maybe too strong a word. The one I quite enjoy is one of the guys who started earliest with podcasting in Hungary, and he does like really long form interviews, and he always does his research and chooses interesting subjects. It's called Az Élet meg Minden. Again, a difficult Hungarian name. I will send you the link.
Okay.
And but I think that I've listened to many of his episodes, and I always enjoy them, even though they are quite long, and it's difficult to make a 3-hour long podcast interesting from beginning to the end. And many times he manages to do that.
And tell me, and Márton, when's your, just to continue with these final questions, when's your favorite moment to listen to podcast?
I run quite a lot, and when I started running, I listened to music while running, but I realized that this was not good because the rhythm of music messes with your running. So I switched to podcasts, and I listen to a lot of podcasts while running. If you run 2, 3, 4 hours, you have time to listen to a very long one or a couple of shorter ones. So that is my main time to listen to podcasts running.
And what's something that makes you stop everything and listen to a podcast? Maybe a new episode that just dropped. What makes you stop everything?
Kind of difficult. My favorite sport to watch is cycling, and there's the best cycling podcast called Lantern Rouge, Farolillo Rojo in Spanish. And if there's like a big cycling race, and they always even before they do a preview and after the race they talk about what happened, and I always listen to those. So I never miss these.
So Márton Bede, a Hungarian journalist and podcaster from S1EP9, our Hungarian partner in the WePod project, thanks a lot for being here on this episode of Sounds Like Europe.
Thank you.
And to everyone on the other side, I've been your host, Javi Caminero. Thank you for tuning in, for listening to this episode, and I hope you'll do it again in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Sounds Like Europe, Cross-Border Podcasting is a WePod podcast funded by the Creative Europe programme. Hosted and written by Javi Caminero, sound design by Manu Tomillo, coordinator Alexander Damiano Ricci, executive producer Anna Ribera.